So welcome to Walpole United WFC.
Hi. Sorry. Hey guys, Natalie here with the two guests, Emma and Ben. We're going to be talking A-League. We're going to be talking Australian women's football, A-League women. Emma, thank you for coming on. Just because I'm coming to you first, just because I think you know a little bit about the A-League women. So yeah, talk to us. How are you doing?
Yeah, so for those that don't know, I lived in Australia for a few years. I basically came in to the A-League, well, it's a W League as it used to be, a similar time that Melbourne City's inception in the women's game. So although there's a lot of good players, and I did like the City team, because they were affiliated with Man United, I could not follow them. Hence the Brisbane Roar. So yeah, and then I followed as a kind of neutral. I followed quite most of the teams, mainly for the NWSL trades to the W League, and obviously any English players that went over.
We're going to get into that, definitely. Ben Gilby, founder of Impetus. We just done a video about Indigenous Football Week. And yeah, Ben, you're the writer for Beyond 90, Australia. Talk to us. You're the expert today about the A-League.
Well, if we touch first on Indigenous Football Week, first of all, which is quite a big deal out there at the moment. So we're partnered with the John Moriarty Foundation. He was actually the first Indigenous Australian to play for the Australian national football team. So they've now got a partnership going where they go into Indigenous communities all over the country, and they work. They do coaching in schools of girls and boys as well, but a lot the headline stuff is around girls. But as well as giving them football coaching and developing them as players, they're also supporting them with their education, which is really important in those sorts of communities, but also their healthcare as well, which, so they're doing a really good job in that. And this is their sort of week to celebrate what they do. And the theme this year is gender equality in football, which sort of sits perfectly around all sorts of the things that the three of us are passionate about in terms of football, and respecting everybody and getting everybody involved. But in terms of me, I'm sat here wearing a Perth Glory shirt because I've got family out in just outside Fremantle, and they live 20 minutes up the road from where this young lady's shirt's from. So Sam grew up about 20 minutes up the road from them. So I first heard of her when she was 15, and I first saw her play when she was 16 out in Perth. And yeah, I'm lucky enough that she's now playing up the road from me at Kingsmeadow. So that's my Aussie story. So I started watching Matilda just because someone from really close to my family started playing for them, and then it sort of snowballed from there.
Oh, that's great. Obviously, we're all relying on you two today. Hiya, Vicky. Hiya, Dennis. Karen, Amanda, get involved. We're here to learn. I know Connor was saying before he wants to learn. This is a learning show for us, just generally about the Australian League. I want to know, what kind of league is it like? Because Emma, you touched on something about Americans coming over. Is it sort of like the WSL where you have promotion, relegation, a few leagues under? Or is it like the NWSL where there's no relegation, teams come in, and then like it's a draft system? Just touch on us. Emma, tell us about the A-League.
As far as I know, the A-League itself, there is no promotion relegation. However, there is leagues underneath the A-League, and they're all regional, depending on states. I think, Ben, does that sound right? That sounds right in my head.
Yeah, so they're underneath the A-League. There are states. Every state has its own NPL, which is National Premier League Women. Yeah. But there is no. They play at a completely different time of the year. So if you play NPL and you get selected by the top clubs in your state, then you can effectively play football 10 months of the year in Australia. Whereas the A-League Women is basically a 3-month season with
Yeah.
12 regular games, and there's an extra finals this year, but so you don't play maximum more than 15 games. So obviously professionally you can't live as a professional playing 15 games a year, which is why they deliberately timed it to fit with the American system, American league, so that players could play in both. But obviously now, because Europe is seen as the place to go, then there isn't really that relationship that there used to be between the W League and America.
I just want to touch on that. Can you see them players going over? American players, maybe like, well, I know she's in England now, but like Rachel Daly needs some game time. That's what it was there for, so they could get game time between them both. Do you see a load of players going over now to the Australian league like they did probably in the past, like Sam Kerr used to do all the time? Can you see that happening? Ben, what do you think?
I think it's probably unlikely, particularly in the lead up to the World Cup, because it's unofficially it's not officially a development league, but it's heading that way now. If you watched the league last season, it was mostly young players with this sort of a mixture of a few old heads. But the exciting thing was watching the kids last season, and some of them have come through and some of them have got moves, and that's really exciting. And I know the priority at the moment is a home World Cup in 2023. So I think at the moment there's been a few overseas players come in, but also a lot of this is restricted because the international borders are still closed.
Yeah.
So
Australia.
Yeah, there's that as well.
Yeah. So talk to me about the league that happened before. Then, because if it went ahead then under COVID restrictions, I'm guessing.
Yeah, last year went ahead. Perth were only told that they could compete less than a month before the season started because Western Australia was completely shut down as it kind of semi-officially still is. So Perth had a new head coach who was quarantined in a completely another state, 6-hour flight away. So he didn't come in to meet his team until I think about 2 weeks before the season started. And they've only just announced this week where they're going to be playing their home games this year because, again, they weren't sure that Perth Glory would be able to play any games in WA at all this year. At one point, there was talk that they were going to be put out on a hub in New South Wales, which, again, is a 6-hour flight away. And obviously, Wellington Phoenix have come in this year. They're unlikely to play any games in New Zealand until February at the earliest.
Talk to me about that, Emma. You talked about
because obviously Wellington's in New Zealand, so with the fixtures, they won't want flights in and out of each country just for COVID, and obviously each state has its own COVID restrictions. Some are more strict than others. Obviously, it's case dependent. I'm assuming. So that the logistics of it is going to be very difficult this season, unless they do it. Obviously, it's in the next few weeks, so it would have probably been announced by now. Or do it like a spring series, like we used to have, where they could basically, like, say, have a base in New South Wales or Victoria. Well, maybe not Victoria, but in New South Wales, where the teams could just all end up playing each other. But then you've got all those teams in that area for the length of the season, which I don't think again is feasible. But I don't know. I don't know what the rates are like in Australia. I've kind of stopped checking. So if they're going, it's coming into summer, isn't it? So whereas we're being a bit stringent because of the flu season, then Australia obviously won't be as bad because the weather is better. So that's probably in their favour. But that's still. So I didn't realise that about Perth, Ben. I don't
yes, they've only announced Macedonia Park, which they've never played at before, as their new home venue for this year. But the first few weeks of the season, it's kind of going to be played in conferences. So Newcastle Jets, Sydney FC, Western Sydney Wanderers are going to be playing each other. All the New South Wales-based teams are going to be playing each other for the first, will that be 3 or 4 weeks of the season? Perth Glory are going to be playing Adelaide United home and away because at the moment South Australia and Western Australia, which are next to each other, you can go in between them, but not to the eastern.
But not Victoria.
So Melbourne Victory and City are going to be playing, I think, back to back. And because Wellington Phoenix are in New South Wales, they're going to be added to the mix with Western Sydney Wanderers, Sydney FC, and Newcastle Jets as well.
Oh, so that'll be a 4. Oh, right, okay. Well, and then Brisbane will just.
I think that Brisbane have got an early game with Perth, so I think kind of Queensland's kind of been lumped in. I think Queensland's been lumped in as another southern or western state, which is completely wrong because there's no longer flight than from Brisbane to Perth, is there?
Exactly.
Flight. So it's basically like it always is in Australia, isn't it? It's New South Wales, Victoria, and everybody else.
Yeah. Agreed.
COVID seems to have really maybe impacted this league, because it did used to be sort of, I would say it was one of the top ones, like all the top players played there, Kerr played there, Catley played there, and all that kind of thing. Like, do you think it was before? John's onto you there. Did you mention Newcastle?
Newcastle Jets, yeah.
Newcastle Jets.
I'm thinking because I'm good friends with Dan Haney, so I can't say anything bad against Newcastle.
No, you can't.
But it was a very vibrant league, even though it was just because it was going between them both. I think it was a mix of COVID and sort of Europe getting bigger. What do you think's led to that? I wouldn't say decline, but all the top players leaving and going to Europe. Do you think it was just the COVID pandemic? Do you think they'll move back? Or?
No, I mean it started when Sam left Perth to come to Chelsea. Was it January 2020? That was the first one. So obviously that was before COVID, and then pretty much after that, lots and lots more followed. So it wasn't really because of COVID. It's because I think Europe was now being seen as the place to play football. But also, if you think about it, the players that were playing in Australia were then going to America and then coming back to Australia. So there was no break. They didn't have any breaks. They didn't have any pre-season. It was effectively 11, 12-month year-round football. So at least now, if they're coming to playing in England, they know they've got an 8 or 9 month season. Okay, yeah, they're going to be going backwards and forwards for internationals. But they know that there is that, 4 to 5 week time when they are off, and they've never had that before.
Yeah, and I think it'll also give them a bit of a break so they're not pushing themselves towards the World Cup. So obviously if they burn out before then that's just obviously not productive.
Vicky's coming here with a question, and I don't know if what the broadcasting is like for the A-League, for the women's side. Can you watch it in England? What would you say? Or is it VPN?
It's different this year, possibly, because up until now you've been able to watch 2 or 3 games a week on BT Sport. But there's a massive new TV deal that's been signed for this season, which I will probably touch on later.
Yeah.
And that is with, as well as with one of the domestic broadcasters, it's with Paramount Plus, who obviously had the Olympics over the summer. So
that'll be like Discovery.
It's not clear yet whether it's going to be like it was the Olympics were on like Eurosport Player like that, or if BT Sport have still got it. So it's probably worth keeping an eye on BT Sport in case they still have got it.
Yeah.
Last year was great. They had 2 or 3 games every weekend, which is brilliant.
I remember they were early morning, really early, weren't they? They come on about 6, 7
10
o'clock.
hours time
Yeah. Who would you say? I mean, Vicky's got another question here. Who would you say the most famous player in the league that people might know, or even the most famous team as well?
Now, at the present time, I guess it would. I mean, Melbourne Victory have got a lot of decent players at the moment. I mean,
they were like the old school Man City. They just had all the names.
Yeah, I mean, Kyra Cooney-Cross is the next big superstar. Emma Checkers at Melbourne City. I'm not allowed to mention the name of a player who's about to sign for Perth, but that's a massive name, and I'm not too sure how well it will go. But yeah, very well known.
Is she known to the league already?
A very well known veteran.
Oh, I know it is.
Yeah, who has officially, unofficially going to be announced. I think tomorrow.
You're not allowed to say, Ben.
I'm not.
Can Emma say?
If Emma wants to say.
Hold on a minute, just so I know the difference. Has she got short hair or long hair?
Short.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
go on, break the news.
Michelle Haven.
Okay, there is a lot of talk that Lisa Devanna will go to her hometown club.
Oh, okay.
Which, Yeah, it could be interesting. And it's bearing in mind her background and a team that's got a lot of young players in it. So that's going to go one way or the other, I think.
That if it is Michelle Heyman, that's a good move for her because
Savannah.
Savannah. I said short hair.
It is Savannah. It's got short hair, hasn't she? I don't know.
No.
Anyway.
No. Anyway. All right, Savannah then. All right. Well, either way, Perth need a striker because they haven't replaced Sam.
They've got about 6 or 7 attacking players already for this season, so it's an interesting one.
Oh, good, because when they bottom last season, they were awful.
They were bottom last season, but there was a very good reason for that because they didn't know they were taking part until middle of December, and the league started in January. So basically, we fielded a team of 16, 17, and 18-year-olds who did really, really well, but you don't go anywhere with kids.
No,
unless you're Alex Ferguson, I guess.
Talk to us about the team that won it then last year. Who's the standout player in that team?
Well, I mean, Melbourne Victory. Yeah, you go.
Got to.
No, I was just going to say because it's what John's just said. Melbourne Victory won the league, and their star player was Tasha Dowett, and I am not a fan of her. So it's just funny. It's not that I'm not a fan of her. She's just been to a lot of clubs in a very short space of time.
So Tasha Downey, how many goals did she score then?
She wasn't in the league last season.
Oh. Was it not last season? Was it the season before?
The season before she was out there.
Oh, I'm missing the season. Sorry, that's my fault.
Yeah, so last year Melbourne Victory won it in extra time. The final kick of extra time. Kyra Cooney-Cross took a corner which went straight in the net.
Yeah, because that's when Wyman had that standout performance. Like
she was incredible. The goalkeeper.
And you got Chloe there saying, well, who do you think is gonna win the league this season then?
Depends on the signings, doesn't it?
I mean, Melbourne Victory are going to be red hot favourites, I think. If you look at the team they've still got they've still got Kyra Cooney-Cross. They brought in Courtney Nevin, who's done really well for the Matildas recently. Kayla Morrison's been named as captain, and I was listening to the Chicago press conference last week, and she came across as a sort of person you want as your captain. She was really inspirational, and I guess it's City probably in behind them maybe. They've got Rihanna Polachina's come in, Rebecca Stott's come back, which is a really ultimate good news story, and Emma Checker as well is really should be playing in Europe probably at a top level.
Talk to me then, guys. You're saying a lot of names, and a name that's come up a couple of times that has put my ear up, Kyra Cooney-Cross, and then you talked about another girl who's been playing for the Matildas. Can you see those players staying out there? I don't know how old she is, Cooney-Cross. But can you see them staying out there for a long period, or do you think Europe will tempt them eventually? Ben?
I think Kyra is. I mean, she's played pretty much most of the games under Tony Gustafsson since he took over. She probably had her best game in the last international window against Brazil. In the first game of 2 games against Brazil, she was absolutely incredible in midfield. I think this year is going to be interesting because obviously she was kind of like the big name last year that was not necessarily broke through because she's been known for a long time. But I kind of think at the moment she would do really well to go to Scandinavia first. Because it's now a massive gap between the A-League women and the Super League over here. It's a huge gap. And I think that's why a lot of players have gone from Australia to Scandinavia, right? If you think of, there's Charlie Grant and there's Dylan Holmes and Claire Polkinghorn for 3 off the top of my head, and there's a lot more out there. India Page Riley, Alex Ewan as well.
Who's just been injured that's left off the national team?
Alana Kennedy's been injured. I think yesterday.
No, it played in Scandinavia. I can't think of what her name is now. It'll come to me. But yeah, she's one of the not old school Matildas, but an embedded player. And she's had a really bad. Is it a knee injury? A really bad injury? Yeah.
Oh, there's Carly Rossbacken, wasn't there? And there was also Elise Kellen Knight.
That's it. At least that was it. Yeah. They're all in the Nordics.
Yeah.
So, who else is there to stand out? I know you said Kyra Cooney-Cross. She made that breakthrough. But is there any other players that you think that's the player that people should be watching. She's going to come through. She might be playing for the Matildas soon, or through this league.
Yeah, Canberra have got some decent players. Alira Toby's a good player. Grace Mars is a good player. In terms of where else have you got? Sydney have got Paige Satchel from Canberra, Jessica Nash. They're really good players. So Sydney could have an interesting year. Possibly not as strong as last year, maybe.
Is Princess Sabina still at Sydney?
Yeah, as far as I know, yeah.
Yeah, I think she's one of the she's one of the standout players. I've said this about coming to United. I would love her at United, especially quite recently that Leah Galton's not playing as she should. It'd be good competition, but that's obviously a very long shot. But that's out of those players.
I wonder as well at Sydney. I think Remy Simpson had probably a better year than Princess Sabini last year in terms of she just made her international debut as well. So Remy, if she has a good year, I think Remy could be the next one to come overseas. I think.
Yeah.
Talk to me definitely about not just sort of Vicky's even got a question here. What style of play is it in the league? If someone was watching, someone was interested, how would you describe it to them? They've never watched it before. Emma, go on.
To be fair, I've not seen it in the last couple of years, but I just like how it's translatable. Like it's the way it's not as I don't think it's as physical as the WSL in the slightest, and that's probably why a lot of it's more towards the NWSL side, which is why obviously the players come over. It's like a home from home, and obviously with the development side, it's maybe not as fast, and it's not as right. I'm gonna obviously this year's an exception, but it's a lot like our Championship League.
Yeah.
But obviously this year we're going to stand out year. But generally, it's like the Championship League.
Well, Championship's my favourite.
Yeah, exactly. That's dangerous.
No, it is.
But yeah. So in terms of development, that's probably where they're at. But again, this is where they need to start stepping up, because if they've got a World Cup, they need those players to either stay in that league and promote that league, or develop themselves within other leagues around the world, i.e. the WSL, and translate that back to national duty. At the moment, neither is happening. They are playing well, but again, like we say, we're on this transitional phase with the new players coming in and some of the old ones not. So it's going to be interesting because it's only a couple of years, so it's not that far away. So it's exciting to see if either the old players step up to bring the new ones through, and or the new ones step up and push the old ones out. So it's gonna be an interesting watch.
Yeah, I think if you look at the squads that Tony Gustafsson's picked, he's bringing in a lot of the youngsters. A lot of the players, even that for this coming international window this weekend, they've got 2 games against the USA in Sydney, and one in Sydney, one in Newcastle. And there's a lot of young players in there that have come through the talent identity camps that have been there for the last 12 months or so. And a lot of those that have come through have done really well. Charlie Grant's done really well. I'm probably a bit biased when it comes to her, but yeah, Charlie's done really, really well. She's kept in the squads. Remy Simpson came in against Brazil, and I think she did pretty well, considering she hasn't really been anywhere near international football before.
No, but she's been around for quite a while. I was quite glad to see her finally in the Matildas.
Yeah, and there's also the Briley Henry, who's another youngster again. At the moment it's in a transitional stage, but I think it's they're in a good place at the moment, the Matildas, because they've still got that really core number of players who are sort of like 26, 27 years of age. But then they've now got in midfield and up front a lot of really, really good young players. And I think by the time the World Cup comes around, they're going to be in a very good place. But the A-League women, it is now, they accept that. It is pretty much more developmental league. But it's last year was fantastic in terms of watching in terms of watching the youngsters come through. And that was the best thing for me about the league last year. And I think that's one of the things this year to look out for as well.
It's Vicky's put there, sounds like it needs to expand more. I think that's potentially what will happen. We've already added in a new team, and I think potentially in COVID restrictions, it might see that. I mean, you just talked earlier. Go on, Ben. I can see you wanted to talk.
There's 3 more teams coming in next year. Central Coast Mariners, who did have a team in the first 2 years, but then pulled out for financial reasons, are bringing a team back in next year. There's Western United are bringing a team in, and they're out. Well, they're out to the west of Melbourne, but they kind of play in Geelong and all over the place. And MacArthur, their A-League team are struggling for crowd, but they've got a really good. They've always had a really solid women's team, MacArthur Bulls. So they're coming in next year as well. But the issue is really more than expansion. There needs to be a full home and away season. That has to happen first, because at the moment you've got the ridiculous situation where there's 10 teams in the league and you play 12 games a season. So where you finish in the league can influence on which teams you end up playing twice, because you only play 2 or 3 of them twice. Yeah. So we need to have a home and away season before we even think about expanding properly, I think.
Yeah. And also, if those teams are coming in, then it's with. I don't want to say COVID still will be around, because hopefully it won't. But it's still going to be a logistical nightmare when Perth are all way over the other side, and then the rest are all East Coast-ish.
Yeah.
In terms of that home and away season, and you talked about a TV deal, Ben. Do you think that will impact it? Do you think more games on telly, then more people want more games, and then they'll sort of say, why isn't it a home and away season? Do you think that will go on?
It's impacted it already in terms of pretty much up until before this season, pretty much every player was on a 1-season contract. So basically you had a contract that what lasted for 3 months, and then you were a free agent again. So when for example, when Sam Kerr went to Chelsea, Perth Glory, who developed her as a player from the age of 15, didn't receive a single penny for her. And she's the greatest player in the world, arguably. Okay, let's say. So the money that's been thrown at it by Channel 10 and Paramount Plus there's now a lot of teams this year have put players on 2-year contracts. So that in itself is really big news, because there's that little bit more stability there particularly for the young players. Because you had a situation where you might be a 16 or 17-year-old who plays 1 year for, let's say, Perth. And then Perth decide, actually, we don't need you next year because we've got someone else. And that means that as a kid, you've got to move thousands of miles to the other side of the country if you want a contract. Whereas at least now you've got a guarantee of a 2-year deal. But it is still that 3 months.
Okay. Can you see that changing eventually?
There's talk that it is. I don't think it won't change before the World Cup. Even if Central Coast, MacArthur and Western come in next year, I don't think it won't go to a full home and away. I don't think it is. I think we kind of have to hope that it comes in as under sort of like legacy of the World Cup, maybe.
Do you think that might actually affect bringing in big names then, if they've got actual contracts, whereas before they'd just roll in after the end of the season and just rock up and then do their off-season in the A-League and then go back? If they have to actually sign a decent contract now, do you think that might deter some of the players?
It might deter some of the Americans possibly, couldn't it? Maybe. I think you, as a European now, you probably would only go. Okay, Newcastle have signed a Norwegian player, but it does actually fits in quite well with the Norwegian season, because the A-League finishes. The A-League women will finish in March, and the Scandinavian season sort of starts in March, doesn't it? So it now kind of dovetails with the Scandinavian season perfectly. So from that perspective, it could work.
Oh, okay.
Could you see then, like you just talked about, some of these younger players, Princess Sabine, Cara, and you said maybe they might go to the Scandinavian leagues first. Yeah. So the fact that now it tailors with that, could you see that happening?
Yeah, definitely. I think we saw it last year. There's 8 or 9 off the top players that I could name off the top of my head that are in Scandinavia at the moment. I mean, 2 left Adelaide at the end of the last year's W League and went straight over there. I think originally there was talk that they would come back for this season, but because now since that move they've played international football, the Asia Cup's happening in January, so that's our Australia's version of the Euros, basically. So it's now not worth them coming back to Australia because they'll only be there for a month and then they're off for the whole of January for the Asia Cup, and then obviously then it's February and the Swedish-Danish season starts in March. So where they probably would have come back, because they're now playing international football as a result of the fact that they progressed so far as youngsters in the game, that now won't happen. So again, that's kind of like a detrimental effect to the league, because these players that were good last year and got the move and were coming back have now got so good they're playing international football.
Do you think any of the players in the WSL will go back and stay back?
I mean, there was talk. There was talk over the summer that certain players were going back. One of whom signed a new contract with Chelsea, but there was talk that there was some going back. I know there's been a few whispers about some of the Arsenal Matildas, but I don't know. I mean, I think if the restrictions, particularly those that are from New South Wales, are okay, because they can more or less go back and forth in and out of the country. Because this is the issue is Australia is governed by its states, so every state can have. It's not like over here where we have an English rule and a Scottish rule. It's literally every state has its own rules and they're different. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Do we think Alana Kennedy might go back while she's not playing at City? Because she'll be playing for Sydney, I assume. I
don't think she'd go back to Australia. I don't want to sound detrimental, but I think she's too good for the state of the league at the moment. So I think if she does leave England, she'd either go to somewhere else in Europe, or she might do a Chloe Legarzo and go back to America.
Yeah,
that's interesting. You touch on the players that could go back, and then those talks of, like you say, Sam Kerr potentially was going to go back. What do you think that triggered it? Is it the fact that they've not been in Australia for a long time, friends and family, lockdowns? What do you think triggered it, and what do you think's changed it?
I mean, there is that. I mean, the other issue, of course, that they had when the games against Brazil happened last month, that was the first time that all of the team based in Europe actually got to go home for nearly 2 years. But so if you take Sam as an example, because her family are in Western Australia, they were not allowed to travel to Sydney to watch her play. So she still has not seen her family. And there were some players that their families were allowed to travel to Sydney to watch the game, but they were not allowed to physically see their daughter because of all sorts of different restrictions in their states. So it's an awkward one. I think there may be some that may be more likely to go home than others, and particularly those that aren't playing as much as they have done. But I would be surprised actually if the Arsenal group went back, particularly Caitlin Ford and Steph Catley. Lydia Williams isn't playing much now, even though now she's back fully fit.
Yeah.
So Lydia Williams is a possibility to go elsewhere, but I still think she would probably go somewhere else in Europe or America.
Yeah. Considering Kate's contract's up at the end of the season, do you not think she might go back?
I'd be surprised if she went back to Australia to play A-League Women. Because because again, it is a 3-month season, isn't it? And I think she's someone who can maximize her earnings. And then, unless she ties it in with America.
Yeah.
But I would be really surprised now the level that these players are at and the level that they've experienced over here, that they would sort of chuck that up and go back to the league. That's not
so if we see any
the level that it was at when they were there.
Yeah, so if we see any of the players go to Australia, then keep an eye out for the NWSL at the same time.
Or Scandinavia.
Yeah, or Scandinavia. If Casey's got a book out.
Yeah. Well, what I do want to touch on as well, especially since we're talking about Arsenal and we're talking about City players, what players could you see? And it's a question I've heard some Man United Australia actually ask an Australian legend. I can't remember which player it was, but I just saw it, and it was why have we not got a Matilda playing for Man United women? When do you think it would happen? Who do you think it could be? I know we were in for Rasso. She went City. What do you think, Ben? Who do you think it could be? I know Emma's touched on Princess Sabini. You said Cooney Kind of Cross. She sounds like a very good, kind of player. When do you think it would be that Man United would potentially be looking in that market, or would it be someone who's already in the WSL and then come and join?
I mean, it could be someone who's already in the WSL. I mean, I think the problem is last summer, it was awkward for all sorts of reasons, in terms of United's transfers in and out for reasons that we've discussed on other programs before. It wasn't an ideal situation for anyone, player, club, manager, official, or anything last year. So I think it's possible. I mean, I think said there, Mary Fowler, she's in the D1 in France at the moment, playing for Montpellier. I mean, she's fantastic internationally. I mean, she's in a Montpellier team that are a long way from being one of the top teams in France. So I think it would be good to see her come over. I think Mary Fowler could be a United player. I wonder if maybe she might want to do something like go to a West Ham or Tottenham first. I think maybe rather, but if you get a chance to play for United or West Ham or Tottenham, you would probably pick United because they've got European aspirations that are far more realistic than the other teams. But I mean, at the moment she's in the form of her life. She's 18
Is she
years
striker?
old. She's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right, because Mark Skinner's just recently talked about strikers, and I know, Blackstenius is a name that's linked regularly, but
she's signed a new contract though, hasn't she?
No, till January. So it finishes in January. Blackstenius Stina.
It was only a short one.
Yeah. So she will be free agent in January. But if she doesn't come, Mary Fowler, could you see her? We've just signed Carrie Jones. Carrie's very energetic, vibrant. He shows that he puts faith in youth. Like you say, she's 18. Do you think she would? I know you just talked about it.
I'd love to see her play here. Absolutely, would love to see her play. I think it's, I know we were talking about other young players before, and I think the difference is with her is that she's had the time in Europe. The French, unless you're Lyon or PSG, the French league is not competitive at all. Let's be honest, it's not. So I think she's had that couple of years over here to develop her game that bit further, and we're seeing that in the international games. So I think Fowler's a good bet for you in January if she wants to leave Montpellier.
Yeah, I think what Vicky said is right, because obviously I don't know if we were in for Alana Kennedy, but we're definitely in for Rasso, and she went to, like you said, I won't say, I am going to say it, Everton, West Ham, Spurs, it's all that kind of thing, and then obviously she wanted that step up and she went to City. She's coming off the bench a lot more, but I thought Man United would have been a great move for her. Obviously, she went for the Champions League, didn't work out, knocked out first round. Now, they're coming back up City, aren't they? So, and it looks like she's getting a few minutes. But what do you think of the two girls that did sign for City? And then, obviously, Taylor hasn't really played them, even though he signed them.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Rasso's been injured, hasn't she? So she hasn't had much of a chance. And Kennedy's had some injuries. But that's part of a whole bigger topic about Manchester City and then bizarre selections and playing players in weird positions when you've got Ruby Mace who could step in and do an amazing job, but you'd rather play players from far further up the field in that position. So it's all part of a much bigger, weird situation, isn't it? Really.
People who watch Alpha United regularly know that Hayley going to City broke my heart. Being a Brisbane Roar fan, and she is a Brisbane native, sort of. That hurt because I knew she would do well at United. Again, I've said Princess Sabini, but that's just an if from the A League. Matilda's wise, that's different. I'm going to go a bit left field. I think we need someone like Emily Gilnick, because up top, we've got a lot of young talent, and we need somebody to steady the ship. And she would do that. Yes, she's hitting that higher age bracket, but we need someone that's going to get that front line by the scruff of the neck and drag them up the field. And I think she'd be that person. She's doing all right for Villa at the minute. I don't think she's playing that much though. I haven't.
She's injured. She's going to be back for the international games. She's gone back for them, but she's been injured for quite a while.
Oh, that's probably why she's not.
She did score versus Brighton. It was a really good goal, chip over the top. And then I was at the City game, and she came on at 2-0 down, and it was just like a toes stroke away from being in the back, and it would have been 2-1, and who knows what would have happened then. TJ saying Kyra Cooney Cross. I'm guessing he's saying he wants to see. But Gilneck would be good. I can see if we did get Gilneck, people would not be happy. Not because she's not a good player, but just because, like you say, she's on that older bracket. She come from West Ham. But then West Villa.
She'd be taking Kirsty Anson's spot.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think people wouldn't be happy. No, I'm just saying what I think people would, because you come from that thing. And it's like you say about the whole Mary Fowler should go to West Ham and then move up. But I can see people then saying, well, she's West Ham quality kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think she's younger, so it would.
I think you can make an argument for Mary Fowler coming straight into your team.
Yeah.
I mean, Emily Gilneck going to Villa really surprised me because she's a far better player than an Aston Villa. You know,
I just think any move now, people would say, you're signing a Villa striker, you're signing a West Ham striker, you know?
Although saying that, Arsenal's signing Iwabuchi. That was the Villa signing. So.
I suppose. I mean, that West Ham girl now from Japan is quite good, and everyone's looking at her. So that might be another one that the big teams look at.
Is she not Chinese, Hasegawa? Is it
Chinese then? Chinese, yeah. Sorry, I didn't know what she was. Sorry. Please
it's all right.
Take offence. But yeah, I agree with get Mary Fowler in now. And I think it's like what Vicky says, get them in before then you say the City, the Arsenal. So like if, for example, she goes to a West Ham and does well, then obviously City, Arsenal, Chelsea will look. Whereas if you get her in now, you know, you've got that there now. And I just want to talk as well about Gilneck. For me, she's a 9. So you're saying she'll replace Hansen. Hansen's a winger. She's played all across the front, really.
Probably now, I don't know. You probably could play her as a 9. She is more of a toe poker now because she can't run as much, but she can still ping a ball in. She can still cut in. And with Mark's, obviously, playing style that we all love about cutting in from the wing, that might be a good shout. Whether I agree with it or not is another question. But I just think it would be good for the team in terms of that. Also, Mark's not fresh to the A-League because Laura played for Canberra? Laura Bassett played for Canberra. When I was there, because I met her, Mark was stood behind me. So he's followed that league. He knows what's going down. Or down under. But yeah, so he'll probably be keeping one eye out as well because and in the shrewdest way, if they're coming from Australia, they will be cheap rather than obviously the big names for the NWSL or Spain or France or wherever.
Touching on Spain tomorrow, so anyone who's looking at interested in Spanish, definitely touching on that league a lot tomorrow as well. Here's a question from Chloe and TJC a question as well. I'll come to that. But Chloe said, which player in the WSL who hasn't played in Australia would you want Perth Glory and Brisbane Roar?
Is this a finances no issue question?
No issue. Well, yeah, but reasonable. We're in reason.
Go on, Ben, you go first.
Oh, do you know what? I'm a massive Erin Cuthbert fan. I think she just embodies everything that is great about the game. You know, she's the one player that you know will come off a pitch that's in perfect condition, completely caked in mud, because that's just the person she is. You know, she chases down every lost cause and she basically wins every lost cause. So I would have Erin Cuthbert in any team. that I was involved with. She's just brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm torn between two. One, Tooney, just because Tooney, and two, Beth England for a similar reason to Ben. To be honest, she's like a younger version of Davana, but with less fouls. She'll graft, she'll score, and she'll fight for every ball on that pitch. And apart from Mary Fowler, to be fair, in the leagues, the striking element isn't as prevalent, I don't think, than the midfield and defence. So she would do well there, quite easily, I think. Obviously for Brisbane.
Yeah. Yeah, guys. I know TJ just talked about Barbara Banda, but I think Vicky sorted that one up. But just want to thank everyone for watching. Is there anything more you want to touch on? I know probably I know you did a lot of notes, but Ben, is there anything you want to say to anyone like myself who may be learning or wants to learn more?
Well, I mean, I guess we've briefly touched on Wellington, haven't we? It might maybe a tad about them. I mean, they've come in again at almost at the 11th hour this year, so they're in they've basically put together a really young team, with maybe the exception of 2 or 3 players. So that's going to be they're going to have a really hard season simply because they've got so many youngsters, but also the fact that as a result of them being allowed in, they have to have a majority number of Australian players because it is officially an Australian league. So although they are the only professional, in inverted commas, New Zealand women's team ever, they have still got a bulk of Australian players. Although obviously, yes, they have got a lot of Kiwi youngsters, but the main experienced Kiwi players are not part of the team. And a part of that is probably because it all came together so late. But I don't think even next year they'll get a lot of the top Kiwi players playing for them. But and also it's worth pointing out there's only funding there for 2 years for them anyway. So what that will look like long term for New Zealand, I think is a shame because at the moment they still haven't managed to get a shirt sponsor. So they publicly, their sort of managing directors publicly come out and said, look, these people said if we come into the league, these companies would sponsor us. They haven't done. So it's really disappointing from that perspective. Bearing in mind this is the only professional women's team that New Zealand has ever had.
This is where the development and stuff is behind, because obviously New Zealand again as a national team are even strokes behind Australia, who obviously are not strokes behind the rest of the top 10, and probably I know that they're in and about the top 10, but you wouldn't put them up even though they are up against the top teams. They're going to struggle. They had that one good win against the USA, and obviously hopefully that's repeated again at the weekend. But yeah, it just needs funding, and we've said this about the WSL as well. It just needs funding. Like Ben will probably attest to, the lower leagues are ripe with talent, but then they just there's just a stopgap before you get anywhere with it, and those players don't have the funds or the infrastructure to go abroad and learn with new teams. So it just falls by the wayside, and that's unfortunate.
I mean, TJ said there's a population surge. What do you guys think that for New Zealand? Why?
And Wellington Phoenix have played A-League men since it started. And they played finals football. So I mean, the issue in New Zealand is rugby union is king by I mean, football is 5th or 6th most popular sport in Australia in terms of viewing figures, not necessarily in terms of players, but in New Zealand nothing can compete with rugby union, literally. So football, men's football in New Zealand, it finds it really hard to compete. So
women,
I think that's more the issue, I think.
Like, it's just one of them that we kind of need to get behind them because they're trying, and they're trying to expose the game. But if people aren't getting behind it, then neither are the companies, unfortunately.
No, and I think
why we
then
do things like this.
yeah, and it's kind of a bit like parallels of rugby league over here, isn't it? When rugby league has tried to expand all over the place, and club after club after club has ended up lasting a season or two, and you just have to hope that that's not the case with Wellington, because it's a fantastic opportunity for women's sport in a country to grow a game. And they're pretty much guaranteed to qualify for every World Cup anyway, because they come through Oceania, and there's no real competition there.
No.
So, it's a chance for them and their youngsters to get competitive club football, which they're not necessarily getting week in, week out. So it's a massive opportunity. We just need someone to get behind it out there.
And hopefully we've got some people watching, maybe from over there, and get more interested. Even if, like you say, it's on BT, go watch it. Get watching different
or
teams.
Even if it's at a funny time you've got the opportunity, just record it and watch it another time. It's just the exposure, and then you'll see players that you'll recognise and things like that, and then either follow them on social media and things like that, and then if they do come to the league, then you'll know to pick them up for certain reasons and things like that. It's just the connections.
Definitely. Guys, Emma, is there anything other than what we talked on you want to touch on, or Ben again?
No, I'm good. I need to turn my heating on. I've not done that.
Karen's saying she's really enjoyed the chat. I know TJ saying he came in late, but he's going to watch it again. Thanks a lot so much, Ben. If you ever want to come back on,
thanks, Ben.
You can come back on. Maybe when it started or it's, kicked off, we can talk about, halfway point, we'll talk about what's happened, who's maybe took the limelight off Kura Karnikos, or is she the one standing out? Things like that. We'll touch back on it all again if you want. If you're happy to come back on, we can do that. Yeah, guys. Tomorrow we've got Yash, who writes for Me, John, and Her, which she writes for I can't even remember what she writes for. Analytics. We're going to be talking about Spain, Spanish players, Spanish league, even Navarro. That's the one. A great player. I've been watching her for a while, so we're definitely going to talk about some players out there. But thanks Ben, thanks Emma. Good talking about the guys are coming on. Thanking you all. Chloe, I know she was saying she really wanted to learn about it, so thanks so much. And tune in tomorrow, guys, 7 p.m. It's going to be a good one. See you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.